Hey, hello, and welcome to Better Conversations.
Hello, it is lovely to be here on this fabulous talk that we have ahead. I'm truly excited to listen to Hazbi for the next hour and to learn and to grow as a person. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is going to be all our conversations are great here, but this one is probably the trickiest one, I think, that we've had, just because we're going to be talking about something that I think we all need quite a bit of education around. So yes, if you've got any comments or questions and you are watching us live, please drop them in the comments. And if you're watching the replay, equally drop them in the discussions below, and we'll be checking those from time to time.
Yes, we love the interactions. And what you said there, Sehaam, about it being a tricky conversation, I think that comes a lot from fear. And, you know, we've been talking about the fear that a person can have about dealing with something that is tricky. And, you know, the definition of the tricky thing is, I think it's not a social norm, and that changes over time. And facing the fear, you know, is you know, educating yourself and getting to know people and removing this fear of the unknown. And, you know, that's how we progress.
Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do, right? In these conversations is to give people the words, actually talk about stuff in detail, and not at a superficial level, but really get into it. So we're going to be doing that. Tuesdays, you'll find us here every Tuesday, streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and of course, betterconversations.live. And our times are, shall I do these?
Go for it. You're on a roll.
8 a.m. East Coast, US, or North America, 2 p.m. Central European Time, 5:30 Indian Standard Time, and 10 p.m. Australia East Coast time. So catch us on one of those.
And I think that this is really a global topic, and I know different countries are at different states of acceptance and even down to the legislation. So I really feel this is a global topic. So it's wonderful that you have considered a lot of parts of the world that will be awake at this time.
Yeah, hopefully. And then, yes, to be our guest, you can follow any of the co-hosts, myself, Mag, Hazbi, Glenn, or Ben, to just reach out if you've got a topic that you think you know there's value to add in terms of a conversation to educate leaders about how to engage with the topic. Then please do reach out to us directly or by emailing bclive@betterconversations.co.
Great. And you can follow both of us on LinkedIn. That's Sehaam's profile, and mine is on the bottom of the screen right now.
Yeah, brilliant. So in a moment, we're going to bring our guest on, who's also our co-host, Hazbi, and they're going to be talking about queer identities. And actually, just before we went live, I was apologizing in advance to Hazbi. I've known Hazbi for many years, and while today they refer to themselves as they, the pronoun that I came to know them as was he. So I was apologizing because in case I make a mistake and I, you know, revert to calling them he instead of they. So and that's to your point earlier at the beginning, Mag, about this fear of getting it wrong. And this is with someone who is an old friend, and I still
he's not that old. Come on,
he's not old.
Oh my God, I just did it. They're not that old. And this is the thing, every time that I use the wrong pronoun for someone, I feel terrible. And I feel terrible for me because I've made a mistake, and I've made somebody else feel terrible because I haven't honored their identity. But I have to get this muscle memory going, and we all make mistakes. And I truly want to be someone who can very fluidly accept a pronoun, have it in my body and use it correctly. But it takes a lot to shift from that social norm that we've been programmed with for so long.
Yeah,
and I see
definitely.
younger people are much better at this. And I think you can see that societal shift. So I'm going to go on the apology front as well as the first person who's used the wrong pronoun here. But I deeply care for Hazbi, and I find that whenever I speak to them, it is an enriching and beautiful experience where I both feel heard and I can hear truly from somebody's heart. So I'm really, honored to be here today.
Thank you, Meg. So we've got an interesting topic. I don't know if you want to pull that up, Meg, about regarding the NHS. Everyone's become very familiar here in the UK of the rainbow with the NHS logo, and I didn't realise this, but it started as a sort of a bit of a guerrilla marketing effort to let people know of people of any gender know that they are welcome and supportive. Did you have a chance to read the article, Meg?
I loved the article, and actually I've shared it on. I, made the kind of side comment of, the NHS have stolen the pride flag, and I was like, cheeky. But when I read the article, it's a beautiful, inclusive story. So this doctor, Mike, had been working in peds in a hospital in London, and he felt that, he wanted to bring about a change to the way, it's almost like saying, I'm a safe person, you can talk to me. And it's the duty of care of wearing this flag. So it's a combination of the NHS plus both sexual orientation, gender identity. It covers a lot of areas that aren't considered in the norm of medical practice. So it is really quite a wonderful story. And it started off small. It started off by Mike having a bad day and, and kind of going out and getting 300 of these badges. And they just took off completely naturally. And I think that is a very good indication of our society, where something that isn't, totally planned, it just, people are like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This is obvious.
Yeah. And what I liked about it was when it reached sort of mass uptake, then there was a bit of a discussion and a bit of a concern about, there was the risk of red tape, right, getting in the way and stopping this movement. But the organisations that did get together, thankfully, saw sense and decided it's about the impact that it makes, and it's about the message that it sends. And there were some great stories. So definitely worth reading that article. And I'll just drop that in the comments there for anyone who's interested in having a look at it, and do share it. Because I didn't realize there was any story to it in that way, but a lovely one at that, which worked really well.
And actually, on the back of that, I looked up, about the different flags that have different meanings within queer identities, and it's really fascinating. I might share that article with you, Sehaam, and you can share it out as well, or I'll put it in the comments while you guys.
Drop it in the comments, please, Mag. Yeah, that'll be lovely. All right, shall we welcome Hazbi?
Yes, please.
So. Lovely to have you here.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. We I have to say we didn't coordinate this, but we have centered you quite well, and very grateful that you're wearing that shirt. So yeah, brilliant. Great to have you here. Let me do a quick intro. So I've mentioned already that I've known Hazbi a very long time, and he is our specialist on diversity, equity and inclusion. And in fact, he is working on a course at the moment that will be released later this year by Better Conversations, called Inclusive Leadership. And that's developing and coming along really nicely. and can't wait for that to be generally available. So more on that later in the year. Some things to know about Hazbi. He is a doctor in that they have
No
they
worries.
have
One all,
there you
Sehaam.
go. There you go. They have a PhD, and and the work that you did, Hasby, was on how the invisible or internal differences between a diverse group of people can best be attended to for them to work effectively together. And I know you do a lot of lecturing and you go into schools as well and talk to kids. And so we're going to get into all of that. I wondered, and you are also an artist as well, in your own right, and curated works, and you run festivals. And do want to also point out if you would like to know more about Hazbi's story, he's going to share a little bit today, but if you'd like to learn more, we did do a podcast session, didn't we? And you can find that on betterconversations.co/podcast, but we'll also drop in the link as well to that if you're interested in listening to it. So welcome, Hazbi.
I'm going to drop off and leave you to be the stars of the show.
See you in a bit.
Thank you, Mag. So yeah, anything I missed? Anything you would like to add?
I would just wanted to say that I listened to the podcast we did. When was it? Like 2 years ago, I think. And it's still one of my favorites, interviews / discussion. Really enjoyed it. I was like quite surprised by what we talked about. So I would definitely recommend the audience listening to that. It was a very insightful discussion. As for the rest, yeah, you got everything right. That's what I do. I lecture about diversity and inclusion. Soon starting to lecture at different universities here in Switzerland, where I live. And for now, the biggest part of my activity is, first moving into my new house where I'm speaking from. Yay. And the second thing being, my art. I do music, and it's taking off way faster than I was expecting, and so that's taking quite some time. And it is related to what we are going to talk about today: queer identities. My music is very, very queer in its form and content, I would say. So yeah. I'm experimenting with a lot of stuff now around all these different, let's say, identity politics. That's how we call it. So I incorporate that into my D&I lectures and also my art. So that's a big part of what I do and think about in my life, I would say.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you're doing a lot around, I love your Instagram posts on definitions and terms. You talk a lot about gender and sexuality and so on. So we'll share the link to your Instagram account as well in a little while. So today we're talking about you're talking to us about queer identities, and we've specifically focused on queer because it doesn't get much attention or discussion, whereas the sort of general space of LGBTQIA plus, the other letters don't necessarily get that much attention. And I loved, in this is an example of one of the things that you posted on your Instagram account, these definitions. And it's a little bit hard to see, but I love the way you describe things. So gender identity is how a person identifies and perceives perceives themselves related to gender. It's one of the facets of gender, the other being gender expression. And gender identity and gender expression might not align. So, and the example that you give is a person may identify or feel like a woman, but present themselves as a man. Do you want to give us a little bit more distinction, a definition around the difference between identity and expression, and then maybe talk to us about gender queer?
So gender identity, as you said, is basically how you feel, and it's related to the gender roles that there are in society. So we expect men to behave in a certain way, and we expect women to behave in another way. That's the most basic binary vision of gender in the world, I would say, but that's the prevailing one. And how you identify with those just gender roles, it can be that you totally feel like a man, that you totally feel like a woman, or that you feel like a mix of both or none of them. But it's really about a feeling how you behave, how you think, what your values are, and how they align with those societal expectations of gender. And then expression is basically how you are going to show it to the world. And the tricky part about gender expression is that we are so used to having this gender binary, and that men present themselves in a certain way. At work, it's with a suit and tie. Outside of work, it's with pants and a shirt. That's what we see mostly, but there is a little variety in there. Same for women, and the issue rises when you have a non-conforming or a gender identity that is not in line with your sex, let's say. Like for myself, I'm male, but I don't consider myself as a man. And then the question is always, okay, how do I want to express the fact that I'm non-binary, that I don't feel like I'm a man or a woman? So my way of doing it, but that's just mine, there are like so many different ways of doing it, is to dress the way I want to. If I want to wear a skirt, to wear it, but there are some settings in which it is difficult, especially in the professional setting, where I just wish, like, my dream would be if I could go with a dress and some makeup on to work, but we're not there yet, especially when you have to lecture and talk in front of people. My main concern is that I want them to relate to me and not see me directly as the freak or the different, so that there's a bond between us, and that I don't create some distance. But yeah, until, like, for that day to come, I feel like we need to see more queer people. We need to drop a few, I don't know, expectations we have about how we present at work, that not dressing the professional way doesn't make you less worthy of a worker, let's say, and that doesn't prevent you from doing your job. So we'll get there, hopefully, but it's going to take quite some time. And yeah, some settings are more accepting than others, I would say.
Right. Yeah, some cultures, some societies are more accepting than others, definitely. So what identities fall under queer? Can you clarify that?
So queer, it's really related to anyone who has a non-conforming gender identity or sexuality, sexual orientation. Most of the world is made up cisgender people, who are like people who are completely fine where their sex and gender are aligned.
So male or female.
Exactly. And women and men. So so that's the part about gender, as I said. Then there are, within the queer umbrella, we include non-binary people, who are people like me who don't identify with this gender binary. That can either be a mix of both or none of them. There are trans people in general also, so people who would like to present themselves with who identify with the other gender, with another gender, and who can transition either by taking hormones, undergoing surgery like sex reassignment surgery, or not. There are a lot of trans people that don't change their body, but they still identify and will try to express their gender more through clothing, the length of their hair, like my trans man friends, for example, they cut their hair short, let their hair grow, etc. And so that's about gender, and that's the T, like trans, and the LGBTIQA plus. And the other part is sexual orientation. Probably we're more familiar with that, since historically the queer movements have mostly been about sexual orientation, especially gay and male gay sexual orientations. Lesbians have been a bit left out of the conversation of the movements. And there we have the L for lesbians, G for gay, B for bisexual, the A is asexual. And the last one, which is related to sex, not necessarily gender, is intersex people, who are people who, the thing that we need to be aware of is that we see sex as being either male or a female, but there are variations, and you're more male or more female or a little bit of both. And that's determined by your genes. So usually we think of the XY and XX genes, but intersex people can have XXY genes, for example. There's also the levels of hormones. Where intersex people have high levels of both female and male hormones. We all have both hormones, but in intersex people, they have high levels of both, and that's mostly related to sex, not necessarily gender. It's really about the biology of the body, I would say. And I think we've covered all the letters of.
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken.
I think we have.
Yeah.
And in in previous conversations you and I have had, there's tension in the way perhaps most people who identify as straight or heteronormative, I think was the term that you used, that there's tension between people who believe you are either a man or a woman, and how perhaps people who identify as different genders actually are more questioning and more exploratory of their identity and their gender. I wondered if you could just say a little bit about that.
I think it's related to the definition of queer, because to me, being queer is also about questioning, as you said, your own identity, questioning how you perceive yourself, how you want to live your life. In my case, it was about first my sexual orientation, because that's what came first to me. And initially, I thought I was gay. And the stereotypically gay person that I would see in the media, that I would see in movies or at parties where I went to. And then eventually, I started questioning my sexuality, since the default is being heterosexual. Then later in my life, I also questioned, well, am I really gay or not? And am I attracted to men only sexually, only romantically, or could I be attracted romantically to women as well? And then I discovered that at some points in my life, I was asexual as well. So there's been a great fluidity in how I live my life, how I perceive myself, how I relate to others. And that's what queerness is mostly about. It's really about being critical of all the social conventions, that they are, all these societal expectations that are so ingrained in all our narratives and all our institutions, and it's really difficult. The first step is really about being critical of those, like realizing that, okay, this is one way of being and behaving, and this is not necessarily the way that fits best to my life. So it's the first part, and then the second part would be about trying out different things. And it's really about, as you said, like exploration, because it's very often you don't know the answers right away. You feel wrong with, like, for example, my gender identity. I never felt like a man, but back then I didn't have the words to express it. And then once I realized I was not a man, the question I was left with was, okay, so who am I, or what am I? And the best way for me was to try out different things, to try out different outfits, to try out different pronouns, to perceive myself in different ways. And eventually I got to this point where I'm comfortable with that, and that I feel like my identity is becoming clearer and clearer. But yeah, it's a long process, and I feel that if we had less of these really constraining social conventions that were telling us to be a man or a woman, to be straight or gay, then we would be freer. We would have more options, and that's what's happening. What's been happening in the last 10 years. I feel there is a variety of queer identities that is emerging, and it's very beautiful to see all the different ways that people are queer. It's really, really beautiful.
Well, and I would think that through the artwork that you do and through the music, that's probably supported you in figuring out a lot of things for yourself. But it's important to realize that somebody who may identify as trans may be going through and will continue to go through for some time, as you're saying, right? It's a journey to go on, is to find the best way of expressing who you are.
Totally. And the thing with some trans identities, it's that it's also related to health. Because if you want to take hormones, you have to check regularly how your body reacts to that. You also have the physical changes that can be quite. I haven't experienced that myself, but from all my trans friends, what they're saying is that it can be disturbing at the beginning, but then it's so empowering to finally have a body that aligns more closely with what you want it to be. And then, like, surgeries are also a big question. So I would say that the most intense queer journeys are those of trans people, because you not only change what you think, what is in your mind, but you also change your body, and that takes a lot of courage, and it takes some time until you have the body that you are comfortable with. But apparently it's a very euphoric kind of experience, so it must be worth it, I would say.
Well, liberating and freeing, I would have thought, to and calming, right? To feel like you've found you.
Definitely. Well, that's what being queer is all about. It's about really, it's about deciding whether you live your life for others or for yourself, if you feel like you are kind of weird or different. And that's what coming out is about. It's about deciding, okay, from now on, I will live my life, and I will tell the world that this is who I am, and I am not the person that they expected me to be. And I want to free myself from all this violence of being seen as a person that I don't feel that I am, and to not allow myself to do some things that I would want, like have romantic relationships with people from the same gender. And it's about liberating yourself from all those constraints and trying to find and shine your true self, which is, I think, the most important thing we can do in life, honestly. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of people battle with that, right? Just to even get anywhere further from where they start out in life. So to do that is hard, but and you've talked about it as well, certainly in the podcast of how important that journey has been. But it's been difficult, and I recall you talking about just either going out wearing a dress and then receiving abuse, and even people being violent towards you because you look different.
Well, the thing with being queer is that there's violence everywhere. There has been violence on the streets for me. As you just said, there's been violence coming from my family who reacted very badly to my first coming out. There is violence in our institutions. I still have to state whether I'm a man or a woman. There's no gender neutral option in Switzerland. And I think almost in every country in the world, there are only a few exceptions. It feels like it's very alienating because you found your true self as a queer person, but the world is against you. We're getting more and more recognition, but the recognition is only for the majority of queer people for now, which is, at least in Switzerland, we're going to vote in September about whether to legalize gay marriage or not. And that might feel like a big step forward, but for people like me, it won't change much for me, because what I need the most is for the state, my government, to recognize my gender identity, to let me be that kind of person, to facilitate transitions for trans people. So there's still a lot to do. And I feel like the only things we're doing right now is for gay men, because as usual, men are at the top of the pyramid, of the social pyramid. So they've moved their agenda forward, but now all the other letters in the LGBTIQA plus are still lagging, but we're moving forward, I hope. And the idea is, yes, to not equate being queer with receiving violence anymore, because it gets really tiring. It's traumatizing. It takes a lot of time to heal from that. And you're in this constant process of trying to protect yourself from violence, which cis and straight people wouldn't necessarily have to do. So very often when I'm on the street or when I'm verbally aggressed, it would take me, like, I don't know, 30 minutes to digest that, then 30 minutes to move on. So I'm losing like 1 hour that I could have dedicated to something else. And it takes a lot of time and effort. And I feel like at least to me, it's the more violence I receive, the more I feel like the weaker my emotional body gets. So it's just too much at some point. I would just like to have a break, and that's what's important. A lot of the queer community is like really good at creating safe spaces. So spaces with queer people or queer friendly or allies, let's say, to just have like this a bit of a space time where you can be yourself without any judgment and fear. And until the whole world becomes safe for us, then yeah, we need to continue creating those spaces where we meet and just celebrate our identities.
Definitely. And I know you're doing a lot on that, and I'd love you to talk about the work that you are doing, definitely, with going into schools and talking to kids. So we'll come back to that. But to stay with the queer identity, something that you said to me was, there's so I should probably refer to them as straight, right? Either man or woman, and there is a there's an attitude towards anyone who is different. And something that you said was, you can be queer, but not too queer. And that, be queer within the sort of boundary of acceptable, as in potentially being gay, and even being lesbian is still a hard place to be sometimes, but let's say gay, that we can deal with. But anything more than that is please, let's be, let's be polite, or whatever it is. But just that sense of you can't be fully queer. You need to be at, a social acceptable level of queer. I wondered if you could share a little bit on that.
That kind of thinking is everywhere, like literally everywhere. It's even within the queer community. I would say, what I've always felt in my life is that there are some queer identities that are accepted, and that I hear that a lot from straight people, but also from gay people who want to be like straight, cis straight people. They want to look very normal. The only tiny difference being that they have sex with people of the same gender. Whereas to me, that's not my kind of identity. I'm way weirder than that, let's say. Also autistic, which kind of shaped my perception of social expectations. I really didn't feel the pressure of social conventions when I was a child or a teen, which allowed me to question my gender as well. And that's even within the gay community, it's not very well accepted, because you look like a freak. You look like you're breaking some boundaries, that you're bending the social dogmas, I would say, that are in place. And even within the queer community, the less queer you are, the more you are accepted and the more you are put forward. That's changing slowly. But then I can only understand straight people who are like, yes, you can be LGBT, but please, you can be LGB actually. Being trans is not yet accepted, but please look like us, have the same dreams, as same life path as us, which is about like work a lot, buy a house, get married, have kids. But for a lot of queer people, that's not the way we want to live our lives. Since we are a community, very often we want to live in communities. There are some people who have romantic relationships with more than one person. There are some people who have kids alone without necessarily having another partner, who have kids with a lot of friends, sharing the responsibility of the child. So we're really questioning this narrative of the good life, which is still dominated by the cis heteronormative view, which is the one that I just laid out before. And but I think it's like with any identity, even with like people of color, neurodiverse people, you can be black but not too black. You can be neurodiverse but not too much. You can be autistic, but as long as you're not too weird, So we really have a problem in our societies with difference, and I think it comes from a place of discomfort, because we're not used. So since our brains think in patterns, it's very challenging for some minds to see someone who looks and behaves differently, and to try to categorize that person in our brain, and that takes like quite some effort, because you have to I don't know if like the thing that I have when people meet me is that they have a lot of questions. They want to know what I do. They can't believe that I'm a professor, that I'm an artist at the same time. It's like the two don't correlate with how I present, and I think it's the importance of visibility and representation. The more we see identities that are unexpected and different, the more comfortable we become with that. But there's been little room so far in history in our societies for people who are different, who have different identities and life paths. So.
And you talked about, thank you for clarifying that. You also talked about in the past this, apologies, my window is open, so maybe
Don't worry.
you can hear the airplane. The fact that you can be hidden so as queer, and it's only through maybe conversation or through outward expression in terms of how you dress and so on, that maybe your colleagues, your peers and so on actually realize maybe you're not straight. And that can be quite a scary moment if you have conformed, you've stepped into your workplace and you, to all intents and purposes, look straight. But at some point in your journey, you decide, I'm going to wear a dress today. I'm going to wear makeup, and that is going to surprise people.
Well, there's the thing with queer identities in general is that there's this concept of covering. So covering your identity, covering who you are, trying to act to pass as cisgender or to pass as straight. Because you never know how the other person in front of you is going to react. It's not written on their faces whether they are queer friendly or not. So it's always a risk. Coming out is always a risk. If I would say the default was that everyone was accepting of queer identities, that we wouldn't have to come out, or it wouldn't be as difficult as it is. But until then, we will always have, with every single person we meet, to make the choice of covering or coming out. And I feel like in my personal experience, probably I can tell a story about this, is there's this university that I'm going to lecture at, and they have a dress code, and the dress code is there are two columns. It's when you are a man, dress this way; when you are a woman, dress that way. And it was quite difficult at the beginning to tell them that, okay, so every single day I come to school, I have to choose whether I'm a man or a woman, and I don't feel like either of them. And I'm just at a point in my life where I feel like I'm empowered enough to force my identity onto institutions. And eventually the whole discussion turned out well. They're now thinking about, or they're designing a gender neutral option. But that's very, very, very important, because otherwise you're forcing non-binary and trans people to be someone who they are not. And to me, it really felt like drag. Usually people would think as drag as like the drag queens they see on RuPaul's Drag Race or at any event. And to me, that like going dressed as a man with a suit and tie, that is drag. Like, it is drag. And it really feels like trying to be someone who I am not. And given how much I've fought for being myself, I am not willing to go back. So it's really a discomforting, scary, and violent experience if once you've decided to be yourself, you are still pushed to be someone else just to please other people. And I'm really, the pity is that the burden is on the person who is queer, who is different, to fit in. And
or say something, right?
Or exactly,
or to have to express it, yeah.
And it's slowly changing, like with stating our pronouns, like even cis people do it on LinkedIn. And I think that's really important, because you show that, because there are two things here. First, you cannot assume anyone's gender and pronouns, even if you think the person looks like a woman and is a woman, you cannot expect their pronouns to be she or she, her. And the other thing is that it normalizes this conversation, and even like cis people get involved in that, and that's super, super important to state them, so that it's not only about trans and non-binary people stating their pronouns. Like everyone is doing it, and it's something that we as a whole, as a society as a whole, should do it, and not just the people who are different.
Yeah, and I would say that there are probably people who feel like I don't need to, but do we therefore, assume that they are straight, or they don't want to share, right? I mean, there'll be a whole sort of range of people who have a different opinion about whether they display a pronoun, whether, but I think you certainly educated me on the importance of it being a point of normalizing it and showing solidarity for the fact that you are open and willing to, because I think just by displaying them, you are sending a message in the same way that the rainbow with the NHS sent a message that I'm sure a lot of people maybe weren't aware of when they supported it, right? So definitely something that I think we're gonna run over the normal hour today, just to put that out there, because I think this is such an important topic. One of the things that, two things I think would be interesting to talk about, and I see some sort of parallels with it. One is, yes, it's Pride Month, and you talked about pink washing by organizations, and I think that would be really interesting. And then maybe showing the other side of it in terms of, the next generation that's coming through and what their interest is. And I'd love you to talk about, the work and the conversations that you have when you go into schools and talk to kids. And I see those as, maybe organizations are behind the times. They're maybe an older generation, if that's fair to say, and where societal norms are predefined versus how kids are coming through and what they're understanding and their level of ease or comfort and so on around gender.
Well, let's start with pink washing. Since it's Pride Month, a lot of companies are showing rainbow flags and showing their support towards the LGBTQ plus community. My issue with that, and I had already started last year, like every company, and especially here in Switzerland, like the traditional companies like banks, insurance companies, etc. I was really surprised by the number of these companies who were displaying their support for the LGBTQ plus community, and yet I feel like they don't do anything for the community. They don't donate to LGBTQ plus associations. They only accept in certain type of LGBTQ plus identities. And it goes back to what we were saying, like be queer, but not too queer. Like people like me would not be accepted in their banks, for example. And that's where it hurts. If you want to support queer identities, support them all, not just the ones that please you and that you're comfortable with, because that's only the tip of the iceberg, I would say. Where it hurts as well is that I feel, I'm not, as a queer person, I'm not interested in buying a rainbow flagged product, or like, I don't know, the rainbow edition of the traditional product, because I personally don't think the rainbow flag is beautiful, so it's not something I'm visually attracted to.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it's a disaster, but anyway. What I really want is like people, like queer people, to be hired, queer people to be able to be who they want within their companies, and that's why I'm lecturing on diversity and inclusion, because trans people, for example, are 4 times more likely to be unemployed than cis straight people. So there is a problem there, and that's the kind of contradiction that I hate with pinkwashing. It's like a lot of companies display that they support queer identities, but yet we are still uh, unemployed, and is the best way you can support a queer person is by giving them money to, I don't know, for a trans person, being able to pay for their hormones or their surgeries, to be able to have a house, to be able to be independent, because that's also a really important part in queer lives, is financial independence. It was really important for me to come out, because what if, like, my parents kicked me out of the house and I didn't have a job and I had to provide for myself? I think it would have been like, it would have made things way worse than they already were. So really, financial independence is really important. And if you show a rainbow flag, be sure that you hire us, that you support us, that you give to queer charities. Otherwise, it's just performative and for marketing purposes. But it's like with Black Lives Matter as well. It's like with the feminist movements as well. I feel like companies really want to show how much they are integrated within society and how progressive they are, but they think they are progressive without really being. And that's what we need to push forward, to demand from companies that they go the extra mile, and we're not there yet. And your second point was about schools. It's funny because today I got a colleague of mine sent me a message being like, "You lectured to my daughter on Friday." I didn't know it was her daughter, so that was super interesting. And apparently, it was like really eye-opening, and really informative to them. What I like about teaching to kids is that they're really at a point where their brains are conditioned, but not too much. There's still freedom there, and you can still, with logical arguments, show them that being exclusive, being discriminating is not the way to go, and they understand that really easily. And I'm really pleased at how fast they catch it, because I was showing during my presentation, for example, I was telling them that I'm non-binary, and at the break, four kids came to me and were like, "So we shouldn't call you sir or madam," and I didn't even mention that. So, and they got it. They made the link with that, and I feel like they're really, really, like, it just shows how everyone is capable of understanding queer identities or minority identities in general. It's just that we need to deconstruct a lot of the conditioning that we have, and that takes some effort, and very often we don't want to do that, but it is possible. If, like, children who are 12 or 13 years old can understand it, I don't see why adults couldn't. So it just shows that it's a matter of wanting to do it or not, rather than being able to or not. And we make mistakes, as you and Meg said at the very beginning with pronouns. It's okay. We all make mistakes. To me, what matters the most is the intention. And there's a big, big difference between someone misgendering me by mistake and someone who is doing it with the intention of hurting me. Like, you can sense it, and the two are very different. So the best thing I would say is just to ask questions, to ask, to apologize if you do mistakes. If there is something you don't understand, ask the person and they will tell you about it. It's that easy, actually. That's how you learn about minority identities. Yeah.
Well, definitely. And I'd imagine, and so I think the tide is turning, but we might, for sort of to reach a tipping point, we almost need that generation, wherever it's at, to basically pick up the baton and run with it, right, and just treat it as normal, and in the meantime, keep educating people, keep educating organizations, adults, and I think I'd say adults probably are the most fearful around topics that are different or new to them, right? Mag, I think you should come and join us, and I'd love
Yes.
to hear what your perspective is. You've been listening. What sort of came to mind for you?
Honestly, I feel like my brain is whirring at the moment, and my emotions. You have such a wonderful way, Hazbi, of explaining things that a lot of people find fearful. And I think that the main thing that people can tackle if they want to tackle something is to try and embrace the fear. So I had a discussion recently with some people who were older than I was, than I was a second ago as well. And basically, they were really afraid. They were afraid because they didn't understand all of the gender definitions, gender non-binary. They didn't understand queer. They didn't understand all of the sexual orientations. They really grew up in a world where everything was quite binary. It was one or the other. And they felt really sidelined and almost like that they didn't understand this world and they were going to keep away from it. And there was also a defensiveness to that fact. And the conversation was completely unexpected. I was on holidays and it was quite triggering at the beginning because there were a lot of words that were used that, you know, where I am in my London liberal life, I am used to people having a certain language and certain intention, and this was different to that. And I could have easily got angry or I could have easily reacted in a defensive manner, but I've been working on breathing a lot, and I tried to breathe through it and I tried to calm my flight or fight response. And it ended up that, you know, by acknowledging that they felt really sidelined to not understanding this world, and maybe they became defensive then, and they didn't give respect to people from that world they didn't understand. You know, by listening to that discomfort and hearing them say that, and then by explaining, you know, so I'm quite recent to the world of being queer. I have been in the heteronormative category for my whole life, and in the last 2 years, you know, it's changed for me. So I'm cisgendered, so I was born female, and I definitely identify as female, and that makes life easier for me. I'm also white, that makes life easier for me. I'm educated, and, you know, so all of this happened at a later time. And however, even though it happened when I have had formed my tribe, it was scary for me to go from being an ally, now that I'm in a female relationship, to actually being in the club. And I didn't expect that. I was like, I'm an ally, I understand this, I support my people, but I didn't step into the shoes properly till I stepped into the shoes, and I felt really scared. And I think fear is the whole undertone of all of this. And there was an article I read on a political, you know, kind of situation in America, and it was, if we all just met one person who was different to us in the category, whatever the category of human characteristic, and we got to know them, we would find that there's so much that's the same and a tiny bit that's different. And when we bond over the cakes we like to eat, or the clothes we like to wear, or whether or not we like to listen to Hazbi's music, which is awesome, by the way, I recommend that you all get on Spotify. But there's so much more joy than fear when you get into it. So the fear is the thing that holds us far away, and the joy and the humanness is the thing that brings us close. And then, you know, we're all standing on the shoulders of queer giants here, because all of the work that's gone on throughout the the history of us as human beings has brought us to today. And I'm hoping that we'll be the giants of the next part of history. So, lean in and have those discussions and make mistakes and apologize for them. And Hazbi, just the way that you explain everything. And one of the comments was, that someone was really enjoying how you were explaining all of this. It's wonderful that, but I acknowledge that with all of your presence today and your eloquence of words, there must have been so much pain and so much confusion and fear in your experiences. So I really want to acknowledge that and say that you're making a huge difference to the world, and I'm so glad you're in it.
Thank you, Meg. That really warms me. Yeah, it's not easy. I think, I want to go back to what you just said about fear. It's true. I feel like it's a lot of people want to fit in because it's less scary, because you know what you have to do, and you don't have to ask yourself, am I going the right way? Am I doing this right? Or what am I doing in general? But really the thing is that I don't want to be old and close to death and regret that I didn't live the life that I wanted to. And that's worth overcoming any fear. Because, we only have one shot at this. So let's do it right, actually. And I don't want to live my life for other people. I don't want to live it for society. Especially when it comes to things that don't hurt other people. Like the fact of me being gay doesn't hurt anyone. The fact of you being gay doesn't hurt anyone. So it's really things where we don't need other people's approval. And the beautiful thing I don't know if you had this as well, Mag, but when you start digging into your queer identity, you start questioning social relations, and you start developing relations with that are better in terms of quality and less in terms of quantity. But you realize that you can talk about intimate matters more easily once you've accepted your identity. I remember at the very beginning, coming out as gay was like so hard. And now it's like it really opens, I feel, a space where people can share about their identity, even cis and straight friends. Whenever I talk to them about my gender identity, they also tell me about their gender identity. And that's what's really interesting about this, is that there's a lot of introspection happening. We get closer to our true selves, and it makes our interactions more intimate. And that's really, really important, because at least personally, what I really like is to have really good quality relations with others. And I like them to be genuine and to, I don't like mundane talk, for example. So
Let's get deep.
Yeah, let's get deep. Exactly. And I feel like, queer people are really specialized in that, and we're used to it. And it's so good. In
when I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and as you mentioned earlier, the gay man is at the top of sort of queer identity because of the way we are socially now. And we think about ethnicity, representation, and role modeling is so important. But what you just said there, like about the path that people who are queer have to walk, and all of the skills they have to learn, like they understand what trauma is, they hopefully have the opportunity to look after their mental health and walk on a path where I'm different to everybody else, and therefore I need to work through this and find my space. They have to think differently. They've got to find their communities. What you said about intentionality and the deepness of relationships, like if I was running a country, and New Zealand is immediately popping into my head because they seem to be doing a lot of good stuff over there, I would want a lot of queer people in my government because they have depth of character. They've walked the line. They know the power of community. They know about critical thinking. Like these, if you're thinking outside the box and you put the fear aside, like these people are really kind of on. They're switched on and they're looking and they're thinking like slightly differently. And there's a lot of power in that. And I think the more we can get people modeling, you know, so, oh, that person can do that, I can do that. I might be a bit like them. So therefore, you know, that path is more possible for me. And I know that you're doing that yourself in your life.
Well, I think we all have our role models, and my role models when I was a teen were not that queer, I would say, but they were different. There's this thing of difference overall, where I feel like I can really connect with a person of color telling me about how alienated they feel, and I'm like, yes, that's really similar to how I feel as a queer person, or with a person with disabilities, for example. It's and the good thing now is that I feel we're all coming together, and that's what I like about diversity and inclusion. It's to really have this intersectional view of all the identities and all the minority identities that that should be accepted as they are. And what I would really like as role models now is not to, because you know, one funny thing, I was preparing this presentation about diversity and inclusion to these teenagers. And while I could name a lot of trans and non-binary celebrities, I was completely lost when it came to naming gay and lesbian and bisexual celebrities. Whereas I feel like that was the most talked about identity in the last 20 years when it came to the queer community. But now, like, I don't know about any of them. And I never looked up to gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. It was not an enough, like a condition for me to relate to them. What I really needed, this kind of difference, this kind of alienation, and that's what queer means. It means that you're like a weird, a really bizarre human being, and I could relate to really bizarre cis straight people. It's just, yeah, I feel, to me, what I really needed is to see that someone wanted to have a different life, not the standard conventional life. And I feel in that case we need a lot more models. That's true, and they're emerging, and it's good that we're questioning that as a society. And also, the most important thing, I think it's really interesting if you question your sexuality, your gender identity, even if you think you're straight and cisgender. It's really, really important, because I feel like a lot of I was moderating a panel discussion last month about masculinities with a trans man and a cis man. And what was striking is how difficult it can also be for cis men to actually perform a certain kind of masculinity, because you always have to show that you're tough. You always have to hide your emotions. You have to walk in a certain masculine way. It's like, it forces you to be in such a constrained version of yourself. And that's why it can also be liberating to non-queer people to really question, okay, this thing of like not showing my emotions, is it good or not? I feel like I should cry, and I will cry. It's okay. And
Yeah.
probably we will head towards a more queer world, but until then, I don't know. Let's see.
Well, I think having a teenage son, those are conversations I've been very active in having with him, that to cry is totally fine. It's an expression of how strongly you feel about something. But you know, it's very common to be told you shouldn't cry. You're a boy. You shouldn't cry, right? I would love to think that that's less and less, certainly for in my generation and for my son's generation, but I think it still really does exist. And, I think it's helpful to actually say why it's important to be okay with crying, for example, because we all need an explanation of what's going on. What is it that we're feeling? What's this build up of emotion? And to be able to say and to equate it with, actually, I'm crying because I'm angry. I'm crying because I feel really hurt. I miss, those friends, or I miss that life, or I miss, whatever it is. Go that extra step in actually saying what it is that's causing that upset. Because I think that allows us to step into another really important conversation, which is, well, yes, that's really important to you. That's why. And it was a violation. And then we start to put words to how we're feeling, and we can articulate. And that in itself is empowering, to be able to articulate and put words to what we're feeling and why. So I think, there are a lot of norms that I think are going to persist as to what's acceptable socially, what's not. But the more that we can really engage with those conversations and not leave them just at, it's okay to cry, but take it another step, is vital to this kind of communication and understanding on all those things. Just it's liberating for everyone to be able to articulate who they are and what they stand for, right, and what's important. But very often we just stop at a sort of a trite explanation or a cliche phrase and don't take it any further.
Totally. And I think it's crazy that in our education systems, we don't talk about emotions. We don't try to learn about them, because it's something that you feel 24/7. You're constantly having emotions, and we are not taught what kind of emotions
Right.
we have, why, and how we can deal with them. And same with interactions with other people. We're never taught how to interact, how to listen, how to talk. It's taken for granted, and I feel like we could do much better. We could, I'm really a hippie when it comes to that. I feel like we can all live in peace and love if we just know how to. But my generation is screwed, so it's probably going to be for the next generations. But yeah, it is possible. It is possible. If we attend to ourselves, to our inner selves, and to others, we can definitely have a more fulfilling life, I feel. And it's also important that we create those opportunities at work, that emotions are okay at work, that communication at work is not only emails and reports, but it's also how you talk to others and how you interact with them.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Hazbi, I was going to ask you, and actually we didn't discuss before if we were doing the phrase of the week. But regardless, you can think about the answer to that. I was going to ask you, this is a very coaching question. What is the perfect world like?
I think it's like my perception is not that far from the left-leaning progressive view of the world. It's I feel like we live at a time where we don't necessarily need more in terms of comfort, or like I feel like we have enough. Like when I look at my life, I don't need like more objects. I don't need like a luxury car. I don't need this or that. Like I will get fulfillment out of something that I do with others, an event, an experience, a conversation, a dance, whatever. And for that, we need time. So I feel like we as societies should work less. Otherwise, we are way too defined by work. And I don't feel like we need to work that much. Also, to make the world more human somehow. I feel like we're either seen as clients or as resources or as competitors, but we're never seeing others as truly human, and we can communicate with like some animal species. Like I can communicate with dogs, but that's about it. So the what's left is humans. So I'm like, okay, we might as well do something with other humans. And the good thing is that we are very resourceful and we know how to have fun. And I think we should just be more accepting of each other, be more genuine, and just have a more democratic and collective discussions about who we want to be as a society. And I think that's missing, but that's about it. Okay. It's a very tricky question, actually.
I like the tricky question.
It's a big question. Good one.
Well, I got taught well, by the tricky question expert.
Well, look, it's this has been a really and as someone said, really insightful conversation. And I've definitely, this is a conversation that we've been having for a while anyway with you, Hazbi. But and the more we get into it and immerse ourselves in it, certainly the more comfortable I am. And in being sensitive to different situations and possibly even challenging myself, right? So thank you for talking about that. I do recommend listening to, it was a very intimate conversation, the podcast interview that we did. And we didn't really get into your story, but I found it that the hour 20 or whatever it was just flew by, and you're very generous in sharing your experiences, and I think your work is vital in giving others a voice, and I know that's really important to you to do that. And the human aspect is something I think we collectively share, right? And I know next week we've got Glenn talking about the talent experience, and he takes issue equally with calling it whatever, high resources, hiring candidates, and so on. So we've yet to find the right word that encompasses us as humans. But shall we do phrase of the week? Are you game for that?
Yes, definitely. Well, I think I already mentioned it. I think the most important message I want to get across is we really, the only thing we're certain of is that we only have one life. So, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot, and I just would encourage people to make the most out of this life and to be themselves and to own their life and to just live all these seconds, minutes, days, weeks, years, if we're lucky, being who they are and not hiding, not covering, not being a proxy of what society wants us to be. As I said, my biggest fear is to wake up one day and be like, okay, I screwed my life and I can't go back because I was too scared of being who I am. So yeah, that's it. I think seize that opportunity. We only have one, and do it the way you want, I would say. It's really fulfilling.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. I can relate to that.
I'm going to tell you my lame way of relating to that was when I saw Kate Winslet in Titanic go off, away from the rich mean guy and live a full life and then, die on board. Or maybe I shouldn't say the end, actually, in case people haven't seen Titanic. But she lives a rich life and she's like my role model. I think about the death scene a lot as well, has been in a very positive way, looking back.
Totally see what you mean. Yeah, definitely.
Well, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for that. Very heartfelt. So we are here on Tuesdays. Do reach out, get in contact with any one of us if you would love to share your perspective, have a conversation with us, help us educate all of us. We're all learning. We're all, the more conversations we have, the more connections we make. And actually, there was something I just remembered, and I just want to pop this in here because I think it is kind of important. You said something that you said, Hazbi, was people who are trans tend to be, there's a higher probability of being neurodiverse as well. And I think that was a really fascinating correlation. Did you just want to touch on that a little bit? I didn't want to leave that unsaid because I thought that was really quite a poignant point.
It's pretty recent. The first study, I think, came out in 2017, and they weren't really sure of their conclusions, but some other studies confirmed that you are 4 times more likely to be trans if you are autistic than if you are not. And to me, it really makes sense because as an autistic person, I had a hard time understanding social conventions. I was in my little bubble. I feel like I had a distance with society, which helped me not feel the pressure of society that much. And I don't think that the correlation is in biology. It's more in the social environment. The fact that if you feel less pressure to be trans, it's most like you have higher chances of actually transitioning and coming out as trans. But I don't know. Little is known, but I think autistic people are more critical. We need to know the reasons behind everything that we encounter. We're questioning a lot, and it's the perfect mindset for starting a gender transition. So yeah, I can definitely see the correlation there.
Oh, thank you.
It sounds very much like an evolution during your life. You know, you're born, and then you start thinking. You get all the inputs of what's around you, and then you're critically thinking. And I think that people are always evolving in their life, so it's probably a heightened stat of that.
Totally, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, definitely questioning and logic. So social, you can transcend social norms if you think things through logically, right? There isn't, some things just don't stack up and don't make sense from that perspective. Well, brilliant. Do join us next week. Our guest and co-host is Glenn Martin. As I said, he's going to be talking about an aspect of recruiting great people into your organisation, and I'm sure he'll share with us some do's and don'ts. So that will be Tuesday next week, same time, 1 p.m. UK time. And reach out to any one of us. We are definitely game for a conversation and a challenge. So thank you again, Hazbi. And Mag, great to have you on. Awesome. It's nice to have somebody else driving.
Wizard of Ozing.
Yes, it's brilliant. Thank you so much. So that's it. If you want to wrap us up, Mag.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Hazbi, you've been excellent.
You too. I wish there were more people like you.